We're going to start with a performance, but not a music performance this time. A wonderful piece of theatre. And before I introduce that, I'd just like to say that this piece, Spliced, which you're going to see some extracts from, was performed at the wonderful Phelan na Bealtaine Festival earlier this year in May, our sister festival, if you like. Well, we've no formal relationships with them, but we love them, and that's a great festival that happens here in May over the May Bank holiday week. And I saw this performance there, and I just knew that it was brilliant at the level of a technical performance, and the actor-writer Timmy Creed, who you'll see shortly, just his piece raises so many issues in sport, issues to do with gender and digital technology and emotional intelligence and culture, that I just felt there was something in it, and that it was time that we did something like this in this county, where cod and God rhyme. And that's not an accident. Timmy will come out and do an extract from that piece. He will then join a panel which will be moderated by the historian, broadcaster, writer on sport, Mark Duncan, and three other panels, all of whom are county players in various sports of various genders, and all Ireland medalists. So I'll hand you over now to Timmy Creed and Spliced.
Hello. Chuna sláisibh. Go maith, that's cluisiant, é sin. Míle buíoch a bheith páirt an córá seo, agus míle buíoch a Nuala O'Connor an deis seo a thuairteam. Tá scéal beag agam díobh, agus is tócha gur scéal mór ma héal atá gceist. I created a show called Spliced, and it's like an autobiographical story of my time playing GAA and then time outside it, and I'm going to share a few parts of it with you. So I'm a GAA man. GAA, Gaelic Athletic Association, as you know. Child, boy, man, GA man. The GA, as we call it, is the largest non-political organisation in Ireland with over 500,000 members. Hurling, or Imant, played with a camogie and a schlitter, I forgot the schlitter, is one of our national sports, and it's the fastest field sport in the world. It's like the rugby of New Zealand, the ice hockey of Canada, or the shinty of Scotland, but way better. My club is Cumann Luclas Gael, Baile an Aspig, or Bishopstown GAA Club. Bishopstown is a suburb of Cork City, population about 25,000. It has a hospital, 2 shocking pubs, a shopping centre that was built in the 70s that would give you the creeps, a Lidl, an Aldi, a Paddy Power, a Ladbrokes, a Boyle Sports, a Costa, and a GAA club. The club is the centre of the community. Our social parish, our church, our religion. The club never changes. It's always the same. It rewards skill, enthusiasm, self-sacrifice, and commitment. We think the same, we like the same, we hate the same. A true GAA man is a lifelong servant. See, I wasn't born a GAA man. I became one. My father is a sports fanatic, and he would proudly bring me up to the club every Saturday morning as a child, front seat of the car, helmet on, boots on, hand in the hurley, just the two of us. I was absolutely fucking useless. But it didn't bother me, because for the first time in my life, I was part of something outside of my family. A movement, a community, a tribe. And I went to an all-boys school then, and the hurlers were the elite. Men amongst boys. The options were chess, maths, or debating at lunchtime. Not for me. Out in the field with the ball, I was happy out. We got homework off, skipped class, extra milk, free sausage rolls, and all the attention. I could see why the other students would be pissed off. Match day was like a free pass. The talk was of new boots, new gear, new hurleys, new jerseys, and old dolls. You had to look the part to be the part. My best pals and my oldest memories are from the GAA. You see, the GAA keeps small communities and larger ones in Ireland alive. There's over 2,300 clubs on this island, another 400 scattered around the world, and in Cork alone, there's 265 clubs. We're connected everywhere we go. Adragol, Ahabolog, Ahada, Ahoina, Arragadeen Rangers, Ballinacurra, Ballinascarty, Ballincollig, Ballinhassig, Ballinora, Ballinor, Ballyclaw, Ballydesmond, Ballygarvan, Ballygiblin, Ballyhay, Ballyhooly, Ballymartle, Ballyvan, Bally, 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 Bandon, Bantier, Bantry Blues, Barry Row, Ballingeary, Belgooly, Bear Island, Bishopstown, Blackrock, Blarney, Boherbue, Brian Dillons, Bride Rovers, Buttevant, Canavee, Carbery Rangers, Carrignavar, Carrigaline, Carrigtool, Castlehaven, Castlelynes, Castlemagner, Castlemartyr, Castlenabear, Castleanroach, Charleville, Churchtown, Kilnamartyr, CIT, Clonakilty, Clodove, Clyne, Clyde Rovers, Cove, Courcy Rovers, Crosshaven, Cullen, Deal Rovers, Delaney, Dennis O'Flaherty's, Dermot O'Mahonas, Donny's, Donerail, Dunamore, Douglas, Dripsy, Dromina, Drumtariff, Dungorney, Airog, Erinzone, Fermoy, Fremont, Gabriel Rangers, Garnish, Glenworth, Glenalee, Glenbower, Glengarriff, Glenlara, Goleen, Grange, Granat, Island Rovers, Ivleary, Kanturk, Kilbrin, Kilbritton, Kildare, Kilvullen, Killa, Kilmackabee, Kilbree, Kilmurray, Kilmichael, Kilshannon, Kilworth, Kinsale, Kishcame, Knocknagree, Lekra, Oak. Liscarroll, Lisgool, Lismire, Rovers, Mallow, Mayfield, Meelan, Middleton, Milford, Mill Street, Mitchelstown, Winter Vora, Na Pearshigs, Neva Bon, Nemo Rangers, Newcestown, Newmarket, O'Donovan Rossa, Passage West, Randallogue, Ratpeakin, Redmonds, Rochestown, Rockchapel, Shamrock, Shamballymoor, Sarsfields, St. Catherine's, St. Columns, St. Finbars, St. Ita's, St. James, St. John's, St. Mary, St. Michael, St. Nicholas, St. Oliver Plunkett, St. Vincent's, Tigmacorrigs, Tracton, Tullylease, UCC, Orhan, Valley Rovers, August, y'all. And out of all the clubs in the world, there was only one that mattered. Bishopstown. 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 Fair play. That's what I signed up for, the maroon and white of Bishopstown. So that's part of Act 1, which is all about the training, the physicality, the medals, the winning, the machoism, the chat, the crack, the sex, until it becomes too much for me and there's a breaking point and the physicality of the piece switches from rigid to more fluid. And I find myself snowboarding in Whistler for way longer than I should have been. And I start doing some yoga and I fall into acting and I get the opportunity to be in a movie. And then I find myself as a GAA man at drama school in Oxford. Stripped back, fully exposed on my own. Dialogue-based learning. I had no choice. I had to speak. We were doing plays. Voice and speech class. What to do, to die today, at a minute or two to two. will beat the drum at 20 to 2, or rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. And the dragon will come and they beat the drum at 20 to 2 to 2 to 2. Repetition, 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 walking and talking like an Englishman. Clown class. Easy. Ballet, pirouettes, leotards, musical theatre cast as the leprechaun. Is this what it's like to be mortal? When I'm not near the girl I love the girl I'm near. Yoga in the morning, unreal. Throwing energy balls. Giving birth to myself. What would the GAA boy say to this? Being a mountain. Being the colour yellow. Being a teapot. Being a scarf. Bonkers, but brilliant. We had this self-poetry class where we had to share stories from our lives. All my stories and poems were about the GAA. Winning, losing, matches, medals, nights out, training, and the bios. I was GAA to my core like a stick of rock. That's all I was. That's all I had. Pathetic. So I figured the only way to broaden my vision and inhabit the actor was to banish the sportsman. And Act 2 is kind of an exorcism of the sports mind and sports body using yoga, which culminates with me in a G-string bouncing off the walls of the court. Which then leads to Act 3. And Act 3 was the hard part. Because I was free. Awake. Yogic. Open. I thought things would just fall into place, but it turns out life isn't actually that simple. And I tried to distance myself from that part of myself, but it turns out it never leaves you. But to prove to myself that I had emerged from this period as a rounded individual, I wanted to see if I could go back playing hurling, free of the culture. I went back as a spy. I felt like I was infiltrating the IRA. They embraced me, wary at the beginning, but happy to see me. The hippie hurler, they call me. I love that, like. The more hippie hurlers and hipster hurlers there are, the better. So I got back into the swing of things, blended in like old times, back into the ritual of it. The hurley in my hand, out in the field, liberated. Didn't care what they thought, I was playing for the pure love of it. Meanwhile, watching how it all worked. Still macho, still closed, still slagging. But they were doing yoga stretches in the warm-up. Progress. I played a few games, I scored a few points, I got back in the team, and then bang, disaster. I scored a goal. And I hadn't scored a goal in 20 years playing in the championship. I was right, yoga and acting and magic mushrooms make you a better sports player. Like, there was only 50 people at the game, right? But imagine scoring in front of 60,000. And just like that, I was back in the pack, out with the lads, cracking jokes. Scary. I then got invited to a wedding of one of the senior lads on the team, and at the church, the captain was asked to say a few words about love and commitment. He stood up, but he couldn't get the words out because he was embarrassed to say something sincere in front of his peers. He laughed, we laughed, the whole church laughed, and he had to sit down. It was excruciating. I was mortified for him. And then at training, I started to notice that some of the lads were wearing these GPS tracking devices under their jerseys. These measured distance, speed, work rate, energy, power. Everything they'd done at training was tracked and monitored, sent to a computer so they could check themselves at home against some unknown version of themselves. This is an amateur sport, like. Where is the beauty and the wildness of it going? The next big game then, championship game, I scored 2 points within the first 10 minutes. I was flying it. And I could feel myself slowly getting sucked back in again until fate intervened and I broke my thumb. Like a myth or a message from God telling me to stop playing before I get warped and broken again. Idle, relieved, finally free. That's when I had the idea. I need to make a show about the GAA. It'd be a simple 3-act structure. Act 1, thesis, my sporting life. Act 2, antithesis, non-sporting life. Act 3, synthesis. That's the hard part. Am I the synthesis? Or is the show the synthesis? So I'd make a show about the GAA, and in figuring out the ending, I'd bring it back to my home club, Bishopstown. Which I did. I was absolutely bricking myself. One of the biggest challenges of my life. What was I thinking? Like they all came. The manager with the triceratops head. The guy who coined the puppy dolls phrase. The captain who crumbled at the church talking about love. The Hardy boys down the back, and there was me in my G-string giving it socks. Those were the eyes looking up at me as if I had something to tell them. Am I betraying them or trying to open them up? I'd infiltrated the organization and I was using the material to their faces. No turning back. We sold out 5 nights. There was silence. They listened. They laughed. They loved it. And some of them came to me after with tears in their eyes and they thanked me for articulating something they'd all been struggling with. You see, I was wrong all along. They want change as much as anybody else. There must be a way. So the gamble paid off. I knew then I had a show. I had an ending. I understood the narrative and it could travel. So I could bring the show to all 2,300 GAA clubs in Ireland. So if I do 50 shows a year, I'll be doing this show for the next 46 years. But those lads give me the confidence to bring the show around the country, which we did on a tour recently. And for the month of August, we were in Edinburgh with the show, and I had to go back and forth to find a suitable sports club, kind of like a squash court. And I tried to bring the hurley with me on the flight, but the security guard classified it as a weapon, and I had to check it in. Just a bit of wood, like. But I felt solid traveling abroad with a weapon. And I arrive at my accommodation in Edinburgh, and across the street there's a man shouting at a woman. He then grabs her by the hair, he pulls her out of the door, and he flings her onto the ground. It turns out Celtic are playing Rangers that day. I have the hurley in my hand. I walk into the middle of the street. I shout at him and stand there. This Scottish brute looks up. He sees me. I see him. Who's going to back down first? And in that moment, I can feel all the lads behind me, the whole club and the history of what this stands for. Bishopstown. Bishopstown. Bishop, stand. Bishop, stand. I am ready for the fight. And after a few tense moments, he mutters a few words and stumbles off down the street. I go over to the woman. I ask her, is she all right? She bursts into tears, gives me a hug, and goes back into the house. Thanks, lads. The hurley is not a weapon. It's a strength. Thank you.
Take a seat.
Oh, wow, what do you do?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Timmy for that excerpt. We only got a taster of it there. I saw the full show, which runs for an hour or perhaps a little bit more on my own GAA club in Dublin about a month ago. And it's an astonishing piece of physical theatre, and it's also it's a really thought-provoking piece. Friends of mine who had seen it in another GAA club were kind of talking about it and WhatsApping about it and arguing over parts of it for a few days after. So, and that's what you want from a good piece of theatre, something that makes you kind of think and reflect, and Timmy's piece certainly does this. My name is Mark Duncan. I've been coming down this part of the world for many, many years, but this is actually my first time to be here during Other Voices season, of which Ireland's Edge is now such an integral part. Observing it from afar, I've always noticed that Ireland's Edge is never really about one thing or the other. It's usually about a medley of things, you know, from arts and culture to technology and innovation. And the really importance of it is how those things interact, often to very surprising effect. This is nevertheless the first time that sport has been added to that mix, and I'm delighted that it has. And I'd like to thank Nuala O'Connor and our curators for making this possible. Sport, I think, in terms of just participation levels and in terms of general public engagement, it is perhaps the predominant expression of Irish popular culture. So it's well fitted to an event like this. The Irish writer and nationalist Daniel Corkery from Cork once wrote that the great strength of our preeminent sporting organisation, the GAA, reflected the innate vitality, the vitality that lies innate in the common people of Ireland. That was in the 1940s. The GAA today is a far more impressive organisation in terms of social reach and cultural footprint. All of the people on the panel with me today have been shaped by the GAA, and in turn they too have contributed to shaping that extraordinary organisation, which is fantastic, but it is not without its problems, as Timmy has demonstrated in his piece. Our panel for this discussion is Timmy, obviously himself, that showcased in the Edinburgh Fringe, that piece, as I said, and it touches on all the themes that we are going to be discussing here today. The role of community, how encompassing our idea of community is to difference. How do we accommodate difference within our idea of community? The role of sport in maybe shaping our attitudes towards gender, and how we imagine and how masculinity and femininity are perhaps imagined and acted out. And finally, the role of technology and how that is kind of shaping not just sport, but obviously our wider lives, and what that actually means both for sports people and for the wider society. Joining Timmy beside him here is another artist, a writer, Eimear Ryan. Eimear is an All-Ireland medal winner with Tipperary back in the mid-2000s. Her work has appeared in every journal that good Irish writers tend to appear in, from Granta to Winter Pages to the Dublin Review to the Stinging Fly. One piece she had written for Winter Pages a number of years ago was republished in the Irish Examiner on camogie, and I think it's has the widest read of anything you have done, but it's also become the basis of a short film which premiered this year in the Cork Film Festival, brilliantly titled The Grass Ceiling, which I haven't seen, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. Eimear still plays in St Finbarr's in Cork, where at the end here, Tomás Ó Sé still lives, but he's actually very much a son of this part of the world. He was born and raised out in Ardmore, out in Ventry, and he has an extraordinary, obviously, sporting record. I think he played for Kerry 17 years. Tomás played for Kerry for 17 years, has won 5 All-Ireland titles, although the dub in me has to point out that they were not won in a row. We were worried he wouldn't turn up today. He was going for the Dublin job, which has just become vacant. But Tomás has a very particular perspective, I think, because he's kind of lived both here and now is kind of living in Cork. He also works as a teacher, so an awful lot of what we're talking about today, he has that perspective to bring on things as well. And it's rare you come and talk about Gaelic games and actually have the Kerry person eclipsed by anyone on a panel in terms of achievement. But Valerie Mulcahy is extraordinary. You're kind of exhausted reading out her list of achievements, but I'm going to do it anyway. 10 All-Ireland senior titles, and I think there are 2 5-in-a-rows in there, are there?
Yep.
2 5-in-a-row, so, apparently it's not... So it's not just dubs that can do it, there are others there. She's won 9 National League titles, 6-time All-Star awards. I think the cumulative total comes to about 31 adult senior titles in camogie. That's actually extraordinary. But her influence extends well beyond the pitch. In 2015, just months before the marriage referendum, Valerie became the first female sports person actually to come out as gay, and she's been very influential in the Irish LGBT plus community ever since, and campaigner for gender equality within the GAA. And we will get to all of that anon, but I want to start with Timmy. Timmy, I just want to say, at what point you decided, right, this, my own sporting experience is good raw material for my creative talents? Why would you turn it? Did you ever think about it growing up as you were experiencing all of this?
No, because I would have had no experience with a kind of artistic expression until I was in my early 20s, really. I was solely focused on sport, and that was my thing, that was my identity, that was my core group of friends. That's what I cared about more than anything else. And then this kind of fluke opportunity happened to get a part in this film and to be an actor and to kind of pursue a career like that. And I had this feeling that I wanted to create something, and I kind of laughed at myself that, surprise, having spent a number of years away from playing hurling, that the thing I was going to make my first piece of work about was going to be hurling. And I was like, oh, typical, it had to be hurling, but I suppose it did have to be hurling. And I didn't want to make it about my own experience first, to kind of slightly remove myself, but I felt like there was something in the lack of something I felt in myself from fully dedicating to sport and that being my sole focus, and then stopping playing and seeing other things and feeling like I didn't have a voice in them, or feeling reluctant to express myself in a creative way. And I felt like that was something that, so the play was pulling out my own creativity and my own expression, but also sharing this kind of struggle by committing to one thing and then trying to do something else, and that there's a kind of conflict there of coming out of myself, which is what is happening in the show as well.
And it wasn't that you didn't think that sport was suitable subject matter. Paddy Kavanagh was once asked, why he never turned his own, admittedly, mediocre sporting career into the raw material for work. He said sport wasn't a vital thing. He said the emotion involved in it is just kind of like a puff of gas. It's not real experience. Presumably that's not what you
No,
thought?
it's just I felt like there was a lack of the sporting experience seen in artistic expression, and there's the lack of the crossover. Even they're both cultural mediums, there seems to be a disconnect between art and sport, I find. So, having come from both backgrounds and being kind of immersed in both, I felt like it was the time to bring them together, and which is why when the show is touring, I bring it into the GAA clubs, because it's like, can these places that are all over the country be not just about sport? Can they be about creativity, about openness, about togetherness in a way that's not just defined by the sport, which is what I think is really what they can be capable of doing, but it just requires a kind of opening up of it, I think.
Eimear, you had similar issues. You wrote a piece a couple of years ago where you talked about your kind of dual roles as a writer and a camogie player, but you actually found difficulty in reconciling the two. Why was that?
Yeah, I suppose they're two very different pursuits, like even just writing is very solitary, and obviously playing camogie is a team sport, and I even found like growing up, like I kind of had two sets of friends, like because sports people tend to be extroverts, and writers are introverts, and I felt like there was kind of no overlap there, like like my camogie friends wouldn't be that interested in the comes and goings of the literary world, and equally my writer friends were like, why are you going home to Tipperary every weekend for camogie training, just stay up in Dublin and have the crack. But yeah, I think there are some commonalities there as well. Like I find, for me, camogie is about self-expression, and it kind of allows me to like express certain characteristics that I think women are sometimes not encouraged to express, like physicality, aggression, courage. Just being able to express yourself like in that way is like really liberating. So.
But within the sporting world, like certainly with any GAA club, any GAA community, I mean, there are people from all sorts of backgrounds who kind of, makes a job in kind of tech industry, as accountants, as farmers, or whatever it is. They seem to seamlessly marry that with their sporting life, and they wouldn't see one precluding participation in the other. So that's what is it just different with more creative people? I was surprised that you saw these as separate and unrelatable spheres, in the sense that most people can marry two worlds.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to jump in here.
Please do.
I think that like, this kind of when you're able to play under a manager who allows you to express yourself and have no real game plan, but just follow basic principles. I think there's a huge amount. Like I felt I could express myself. I often felt my most confident on the pitch, and I was able to play off instinct. And I was that kind of a player who just did what felt natural. And I wasn't overcoached. We were coached on the skills, but like you were allowed to play your game. Or it was like basketball. You kind of just run what you see in front of you. So, and I remember being in college. I did PE, and we had a philosophy seminar. We talk about or debate how sport can be art, and a wonderful soccer free kick off the ground, is a form of art, or at least a lot of the sports people on the course. Were vouching for. But I do think there's huge expression in sport, and obviously maybe more sports than others, but I think you can express yourself if you're in that environment which allows you, or that team, the manager allows, and not everything is ordained or pre-planned.
I suppose, Timmy, where you kind of find your artistic personality is actually almost when you leave Cork, when you kind of go to Whistler and you find that other kind of side of your personality and develop it. So I suppose really what we're talking about is community and how people fit into different communities. That brilliant recital which we had this morning about all of those place names in Cork, and that's hard to do in Cork, because Cork has more GAA clubs than any other county in Ireland. Much be easier to do it in Dublin, there's only 80. But Tomás, you've lived, obviously reared here, now living in suburb Cork. So can you talk about where the GAA, what role it played in your upbringing, and where you see the difference in it now in a different... I think the context actually matters, where you grow up and how the GAA impinges upon your life.
Yeah, well, I just grew up back the road, and God is God back here for us. And I suppose in terms of, and I'm a school teacher now, and it was the link that brought us together, basically. We had school. We were in an area where I had three brothers, And there weren't any other houses around the place in terms of young fellas or people to play with. And we used to get on the bicycles every Tuesday and Thursday or whatever evenings we were training, and we'd cycle the 5 or 6 miles back to Gollars. And they'd come, even though it's a huge area west of Blinner or west of Milltown Bridge, that's where we used to come together. And I suppose, fast forward so many years, it's completely different in Cork. But anybody, and I suppose I was consumed, and it's only in the last few years that I've retired that I've noticed that I was absolutely, totally and utterly consumed by football from whatever age I actually got serious. And I went on to another level then from about 18 and 19, and all decisions in my life in terms of work, everything was based around football, and probably unhealthily. But it always came back to here, no matter where I was or what I was doing, what time of the year. If you're away with Kerry, there had to be tomorrow afternoon there'll be a West Kerry Championship final up here between Dingle and Gaeltacht, and all the inter-county players that have gone throughout the season will be back with their clubs, and they'll celebrate it. And we were lucky enough, and I was very lucky to play for years with Kerry and have success with Kerry, but we were very, very lucky to have a very successful club team. And the memories of that club team back here in the Gaeltacht when they went on a great run of championship performances in Kerry, and it was brilliant for a rural area to be beating the towny teams and to be beating. And we went on and we met teams from Cork or whatever. We won Munster, and we had the highs and lows. We lost an All-Ireland club final, but for us back here, it was what bound us together. And everybody we knew, everybody we spoke to during the week, the conversation was football, and it was community, and it was being part of it. But you go to Cork, and I went to Cork, and you could be living, the big difference is you don't know the people living next to you, you don't know your neighbours, you don't know, it's different. And I was a full year down there. When I finished football in 2013, I finished with the club as well, and my plan was to retire fully. And I don't know why, in 2014 I went a full year without it, but I came back to Nemo. And I was talking to Timmy outside. I chose Nemo because I just knew them. I knew them. Anywhere I went, anywhere I've gone, or anywhere I continue to go, the connections. I find it very hard to talk to people that don't have a football background. I'm a shy person. I find it very hard to engage. If a fella is very interested in something else, or even other voices now, I find it hard to talk to music. And this connects me with other people, and it always has done. And I don't know, was it that I missed that, but the second I went into the Nemo dressing room, even though I didn't know them, I felt accepted, and I felt happy, and I felt comfortable, and I had a great experience down there as well. But this is home, and community is in the GA, and Timmy's show, it shows that. Geez, you buy into it, and everything revolves. And I know he's talking about change and people to be different, and geez, the GA is everywhere. If anything is to change, if you could get it through the GA, you're reaching everybody,
Absolutely. When you said it bound people together, did it just bind the boys together, or were there girls actually involved when you were actually growing up here?
There was no girls' GA when we grew up here, no. There wasn't. There is now, and they were very strong. They were winning county championships and all that, but it wasn't as organised as it is nowadays. It was very, very even now, you go back to Gollars, it's a different GA back here as well. There's more people involved. You go back to any session back there now, there'll be 5 or 6 parents involved, and it comes from school, everything. There's just more of an effort. Back then it was Eimear Ryan who took charge of the under-12s, under-14s, under-16s and minors, every single team. He's taken a well-deserved break, but that was it, And, but the overall community, sense of community was the same. But I think everybody sees the value of GA now, and it's brilliant. They want their kids playing football. They want them playing sport. They don't want them inside on a tablet or something. And the benefits of it is huge, I think, in my opinion.
My own experience in my own community is that now GA clubs much more accurately reflect the complexity of our communities. When I was growing up, there were very few women involved. But Valerie, when they do become involved, you find that maybe they don't get the equal shake of the stick. I'm talking about your underage experience, perhaps.
Yeah, so, when I was playing underage, we got very little, and I think even when I was playing with Cork, as years went by, there was a lot of people came in and helped out voluntarily, or, you know, we only because we got to play in All-Ireland semi-finals that were televised, that's when we got to keep our jersey because TG Car had sponsored the jerseys. So there's many teams and club teams and county teams that there's so little funding there for the women that they don't get to keep their jersey at the end of the year, which is, you know, disgraceful really when you think about it. But things have improved radically, and you know, I've actually been one of the founding members with others forming the Women's Gaelic Players Association, just because when we were growing up, like when I was 12, I got to play in the Skeena Skull final, which is, you know, a big primary school competition. It was I was in the first female team that represented our school. So the 6th class teacher happened to be a male and was the sporting person in the school, and he formed the team from me begging him from the age of, like, when I was in 4th class to, like, play with boys, and I wasn't allowed. But anyway, we got to play when we were in 6th class, and I just thought that was the norm. Then run out through the tunnel into Parkweave, and I never got to play there since. You know, and I've played in Crow Park more than I've played in Parkweave. So things like that where there was kind of no thought to why were we playing there, or why would we ask to play there, or I don't even know why we didn't get to play there. Was it us not asking? Was it the county board wanting to save the pitch? I don't quite understand. But like, so we did face that. When I was growing up, there was no real teams formed around the area. My mom and others had to form a club. I went to an all-girls school where we played hockey or basketball or table tennis. So, you know, it required others to kind of get on board and form things to allow us to be able to play. And I think a lot of my Cork teammates would have played on the lads teams because there was no opportunity back then. So now, thankfully, you know, we even have the boxing thanks to Katie Taylor and people who have stepped forward and really pushed it and created opportunities for the girls out there. So yeah, we've had poor experiences, but I think that is changing, thankfully.
Yeah. Eimear, you've written about just how positively participation in sport affects how girls and women think about themselves and their own bodies, and just, you know, and what they're capable of doing.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, like, you take up space differently when you're on the pitch, you know, and I think for women, like, a lot of just navigating the everyday life is about, you know, avoiding danger, you know, not walking home alone in the dark by yourself, or, you know, just taking those kind of steps, taking up as little space as possible sometimes. And I think getting the opportunity to go out and play a team sport, a physical sport, you're kind of just negating all of those other learned behaviours, you know, and you just get a chance to go out and express yourself. But I'm totally picking up on what Valerie said there, that I think that was a really common experience kind of back in the 90s, that you'd play on the boys' team, you know, if you're a girl and you were interested in it. But I still remember, like, I think I played up till under 14, but, like, if you know, there'd be good crowds at the games, like if you're playing on the under 14 hurling team. And then a camogie club was founded and I started playing with the camogie then. But you just saw the crowds drop off, you know, and I remember kind of learning even at that young age that, you know, even if I reach the pinnacle of my sport, I'm still never going to have, you know, what the lads have, or I'm still never going to have the fame that they have, you know. So you kind of learn that lesson quite young when you're playing.
Yeah, well, I think it's lovely that has changed, because even recently the Cork minor captain of the lads team, the minors, is from Mourneabbey, so Mourneabbey would have become really good in the women's game, and they actually just won the All-Ireland. So he was on about, you know, someone asked him in an interview, you know, what's your influence, or who's influenced you? And he was like, the Cork team, you know, I think they've been amazing, blah, blah. And then he had to say the women's team. And that's lovely to hear an 18-year-old guy who's looked up to his females around his area, you know, who have been role models for him. So it's definitely changing, but it has taken a lot of time.
Can I ask you about some of the institutional issues? Because one of the great problems with lack of representation in the GAA. I remember reading a report, it was written in the 1980s in Wexford, and one of the issues they identified was just the society was changing, but actually there were so few women involved at any level. But they were doing a report on the GAA, not on the Camogie Association, not on the Ladies Gaelic Football Association. So the fact that they are separate organisations, is that a problem in terms of how you plan facilities, how you accommodate people on pitches, and develop young girls within clubs?
Yeah, I think it is an issue. Like, we don't own any grounds. You know, maybe there's one or two places owned. The Cork Camogie got together and did a lot of fundraising, and they have their own grounds now. in Mahon, but you're at this, like, you're at the discretion of, if the lads, we used to have training sessions with the Cork women's team, and we'd have to get off for an under 16 boys training or a match, can't remember. But like, if you reverse that, imagine if you went out training and then go, okay, come on lads, you have to come off, there's an under 16 girls match going on. It wouldn't be heard of, but we nearly had to accept it because we don't own the grounds. We're always just hoping that we'll get a double header, and thankfully those have come in more, and it has created more exposure and more media coverage. But it does cause problems because, you know, that we don't have anything really ourselves. We do have to ask. And yes, there are an awful lot of women who help out and ensure that the GA clubs around the country are still running, you know. So there is a bit more emphasis on trying to get more collaboration together. Even things like the players, the GPA and the women's GPA is working closely together. So I think that is needed, yeah.
And I don't know if, like, loads of people realise that the way the camogie and the ladies football are separate organisations to the GA. I think people presume it's just all the one organisation, whereas in fact there's kind of a big ring of patriarchy that still sits over the whole thing from the top down, which is, it is changing, but it's still there, and it's like, it's a shame, but like, you do see it's shifting, but the more awareness we have of that's a thing, the more people can actually go, actually that's not right, you know. And
they're trying to do this one club model where, you know, everyone is encompassed in the same thing. Like, I think where it works really well is in college. So when I went to UL, there was one officer who was dedicated to looking after all the GA, the 4 teams, and there was no difference made. We all had to go to the meetings so that we'd get our funding. We were all treated the same, and it really worked. And you're one community, because essentially we're all from the same families. Like, there was often matches there where we'd play an All-Ireland final, and there was brothers of the girls playing who were playing championship matches back in Cork, and they didn't put off the match, you know. So it's you know.
But it's been led from below, because it's coming from club levels, it's coming from in colleges, but at the top.
Yeah.
And the resistance seems to be within the Camogie Association and Ladies Gaelic Football. Is
yeah.
that to lose identity, do you think?
And even as Timmy said, the fact that Camogie Association and the Ladies Football Association are separate, I mean...
Don't get on really. Let's be fair. Like,
but so many fixture clashes, you know, for dual players, like, it's outrageous that that'd be happening at county level, you know. It just makes sense that it's all under one umbrella. But yeah, I think you're right that at grassroots level there is a lot of cross cooperation, and it kind of happens quite naturally. But how do you raise that then to the national level, you know?
Yeah. Can I talk to Valerie about your decision in 2015 to come out? Because it was a big moment. As I said, it was a historic moment within the context of Irish sport, not just Gaelic games. Why you felt that was an important moment? Obviously, it was in the context of the campaign, but why you didn't feel comfortable enough doing it maybe prior to that, and just the response you got as well.
So the opportunity arose where I always kind of felt, once it became more comfortable, because I had been open out with my family with a few years, but the opportunity arose where I wanted to do it in the right way, and I didn't want to just to do it half-assed, so excuse my language. So I said the opportunity arose, I got asked would I like to be part of a documentary, Dawn Rogue's documentary, which looked into how it is to be gay in Ireland and also around the world. So I felt that would be a nice way to share my story, or to hopefully make a difference. And I thought as well, by not doing it, if I didn't do it, there was a big message in that, like, why am I hiding something, or is it not okay, is Valerie not comfortable? And I knew that, I guess because when I was younger, I didn't really have that person who was out, or that I could relate to, that could make me look and go, geez, do you know what, everything will be okay, or she's getting on grand, or she's accepted, you know. So I kind of wanted to be that person for the younger me, and I knew it could make an impact, and thankfully it has. And when I did be part of that documentary, which aired in January before the marriage equality referendum, it had a big impact. And I think it kind of led the way in other people in different areas and in different public forum coming out and kind of sharing their story and normalising it and making it what it is, which is, you know, just people in the community who happen to be attracted to someone of the same sex as them. So it was actually really well received. I was obviously a bit apprehensive. I didn't really want to be talking about my private life, but I knew it was important, and I knew the timing was going to be good. And yeah, I got a huge, overwhelmingly positive experience and feedback, and actually, it would be lovely if everyone could experience that, you know, because there is that fear that you won't be accepted, or that people will just associate you with your sexuality rather than you as a person. And like I was a teacher, I'm still a teacher, I'm on a career break, but you know, I could have been fired essentially, you know. I knew I wouldn't have been because my boss and my principal and staff were really accepting, but you know, it was a concern. But anyway, I said I needed to do it, and I felt it was important, and I'm really glad I did do it.
We hear so much about, I suppose, how toxic an online environment is, and you kind of go into social media and it doesn't take you too long to realise actually many of the avenues go down are just kind of online sewers. But actually you had a very different experience of that when you came out.
Yeah, I think, you know, there was obviously a lot of messages from people I didn't know, or people who did know came up to me. But yeah, the online experience was really good. And I think in general, I don't know, it was the same experience everyone else has, but you know, if something bad about you is said, I think everyone just rolls in and shuts that down and stops it. So it's like the third party, and if they're seeing a bully acting out, that the third party comes in and quashes them and kind of plays their part. So I definitely had a very positive experience, yeah.
Can I ask about homophobia in the women's game? Because we associate it, I mean, the ideas around masculinity are so hardened by sport and have done so over decades, and that's why it's been very difficult for people to come out. Does that exist in the women's game, in the dressing room? Is it there at a casual level, Eimear?
Yeah, I think I have experienced it kind of in the past. I suppose I would have played on teams where there was girls who were out and they were accepted, but there'd still be like the odd homophobic joke kind of thrown around, and it was kind of this weird dual thing where it was like your teammate who's gay, you're like, well, we like you, we accept you because you're one of us, you know, but for those kind of unspecified gay people out there, we might still make fun of them, you know. But I think like it's definitely kind of improved in recent years, like, and with the marriage referendum and everything, and like people like Valerie coming out, and one thing that really strikes me as well is that like there's been a number of like female sports people who've come out since, but ever since Don't Look came out, there hasn't really been anybody, you know. And I really thought that would kind of open something and kind of start a conversation, and more people would feel comfortable coming out, but it hasn't really happened that way for the men.
Yeah. Timmy, there's a very arresting scene in your play where you undergo this complete personality transformation. It's when you're out after a match with your team, celebrating, and I don't know, there's a kind of a demonic personality kind of comes to the fore when you're out celebrating. It's aggressive, it's misogynist. This is clearly something you've witnessed and experienced in yourself and just thought, no, I don't like that side of me. I don't like what sport does to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's mainly through sport, but I went to an all-boys secondary school as well, you know, so there was 700 boys every day together. So you're building this notion of brotherhood and boys being together, you know. And then when you mix that with the sport as well, where it's like a strong brotherhood, pack mentality, and the stronger the pack is, potentially the improvement you can have with the success. We had this really tight-knit group of friends, so when we played together, we just played like friends together, you know. So like it was helping us our success on the field. But then there's this strange growing of this mentality that it's all about the pack and it's all about the lads and it's all about how we strengthen our bond, as opposed to, you know, guys reluctant to bring their girlfriends to a night because it was a challenge to the pack mentality, you know, and a fear of challenging the pack mentality, and then through a lack of awareness as a young lad as to how to behave with women, or what you think is good, or what you think is what gets you recognized by the pack, is this kind of weird distortion that happens as a young lad without knowing. It comes from a lack of awareness, and that this is the way we should behave, and this is what's good, and this is what props you up in the group, which when you're in a strong pack mentality, that's all you're looking for, to be propped up in the team, to get your place on the team, to be propped up in the group, and someone to say to you, like Cormac was saying, the validation coming from outside, you know, in the team saying, we validate you based on, sometimes it's what you do in the field, sometimes it's what happens with a woman the night before or something, you know. And it's from a lack of awareness and a lack of talking about it that it's actually negative. It can impact you negatively. And maybe that's just the behaviours of young lads that's something that you have to go through, but I do think it can start at a younger age where young lads are being informed as to the way to behave with each other and with women as well.
Tomás, without asking you to disclose any secrets or give any revelations, you've been on countless team holidays with Kerry over the years, which I presume was mostly lads. Does that ring true?
It does, yeah. That's exactly like it was. For us, it would be like you spend so much time together. And I'd say at inter-county level, and you look at the rugby lads and all that, they go off to camp for weeks on end. And it would have been like that. It would have been, you're training all year long, and it's very hard to drive yourself through the full year of it. And you need kind of, you know, I suppose we'd have a holiday at the end of a year, and, you know, it'd be like famine and the feast. So there was a huge culture of we earned our time here now to enjoy ourselves, and we would. And that would actually drive you on then, where you'd go back into camp and you'd go back training. But it was all us. It was everything else was blocked out. It was like there was something happening here, but there was something else happening outside. And looking at it now, we knew no different. And exactly the way Timmy described it is exactly how it was. And, you know, you can say whatever went on holidays and everywhere, it wasn't really healthy. It was like carnage, basically, for... No, not on the teen holidays, but what I'm saying is, I suppose, we felt that we had worked so hard, and then you go off and enjoy yourself, and then you go back training, and I don't think it was healthy in my mind, you know, and that kind of, I suppose, homophobia and all that crack was kind of, you know, you had to behave a certain way. You weren't going to say certain things inside there, or you weren't going to go off to a theatre outside in Bangkok on your own, like, or whatever. It was you just went with the pack, like, and you weren't going to be different. And now, having said that, you could talk like that, but you could also talk about the very positive stuff over that side of it, which I would say as well, you know. And it'd be important to say it's not all negative or anything like that, but in terms of a team and a men's team, and it is, I think there's a lot of it kind of unhealthy enough, the way they gear towards thing, and way, you know, you won't say a certain thing because somebody might say something else. But I'm a school teacher, and, you know, the attitudes, I think, are changing. I think that the whole education around if you have difficulties in speaking to somebody, and speaking, if you feel a certain way, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no shame on it. You shouldn't carry, you know, that is all at primary level now. And I went to secondary school as well with lads, and geez, I would have been I wasn't able to talk, not to mind, express my feelings. And I think it was sport actually that I got confidence in. But I think at primary level now there's a huge emphasis on everybody. You have circle time twice a week, where they all get into a circle, and it's a time where the teacher comes to their level and you can talk openly and nothing leaves the group. And I think children are aware of how important it is to be open and how important it is to share. And I do think that will gravitate towards the GAA as well, because these are the kids that will go in there. And if it's okay at school, it's okay in the GAA club as well.
But we're talking about community, but community is no longer just a physical place. It exists online in a virtual world now. And technology is disrupting and changing our lives at an extraordinary rate. I'm interested, Timmy, I think it was Nuala who told me that when you sat down to write an early draft of that, the role of technology had a bigger part in your play. What were you thinking about? What were you trying to get across with foregrounding technology in the play?
I suppose it's the distance that's growing from the technological side to the base, like elemental root side of the game that exists with the game. But when the focus starts to shift on the technological side, do you lose aspects of the kind of grounding elemental forces of it, as opposed to people? It's much easier to see the technological because the other stuff is inbuilt in you and it's inbuilt in the ground. it's much easier to see the technological advantages and to see how that looks on like Sky Sports when they pull up all these charts. You're like, wow, you know. Whereas really, it's like it doesn't do anything to the person in here, or it doesn't really tell us anything but just statistics, you know, which is doesn't do anything to the person playing the game or to the actual game. It's just this evolving of the analysis of it, and it brings us further from the root of the game, I think, you know. And
But if sport, I never agree that sport is necessarily healthy. Physical exercise is healthy. Sport is not necessarily healthy. And team games are competitive sport. It's about getting an edge. It's about winning. So therefore, we absorb all of this technology to improve performance. Is this just the price we pay for playing a competitive game and trying to improve ourselves all the time?
possibly, but then when you see it with GA, because it's an amateur game, like fair enough, you look to NFL and the other sports that are professional, there's a sense of you sign the contract, so you sign away your own kind of data. Even though someone told me recently there was rugby players in Leinster who didn't agree to their data being taken, because then that's passed on when they go to another club. All their data from the previous years is shown as to their injuries and things, and people felt that was unfair. Because you play and what you do on the field should be enough. Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. But Tomás, and you didn't do much of that. You didn't have much. There was very little kind of, technology used when you were playing. It's really a kind of a modern phenomenon now, isn't it? Really, in the last 5-10 years, it's come into the game.
We were talking about it earlier, that the stats in every match you go into, and we were speaking about it in terms of you go in at half time in a game, and every stat in every area and this is an amateur sport, even at club level it's happening, where everything will be pointed out to you. And I played in an era where there was none of that. There was nothing like if we were losing, it was on the scoreboard. It wasn't how we had to actually, that was it, like it was losing on the scoreboard and we had to score more than the opposition. There wasn't much thought given to why we were actually losing or where. Now, if it was something obvious, obviously it would be pointed out. But it came to a level. The last year I played with Kerry was 2013, which is 6-7 years ago. And we were just saying, like, at the last, I could, it's scary really, and again, this is an amateur sport, and the levels are being pushed up, and this is the unhealthy side of it, I think, and the pressures that it brings on players and the pressure it brings on management. I could access on a laptop who we were playing. So if I was deep in September and we were playing the Dubs and I was marking Diarmuid Connolly, I could type in Diarmuid Connolly and every piece of play that was televised on Diarmuid Connolly would come up right in front of me. And I would study Diarmuid Connolly, and the management would know how long I spent online. So you'd obviously put it on and leave it on there and watch your television. But it is, and I do think it, like, that's the side of it. And we spoke about this. It's like we're being trained or coached, or it's kind of like machines in terms of the creative side or off the cuff side. Is we have a system of play and that's it. And I think we're taking from other sports. And I don't know, is there any way to stop it? And Jim Gavin is after retiring today, and somebody made the point, we were on radio earlier on, and with him, I think what he has done above in Dublin, and every time they speak about it, you said, geez, they're talking awful bull there. They're talking, it was all about the people themselves first and then the game after. And in other words, make sure the person is good and that you have a solid footing in terms of how the way you feel and what you want to achieve, and then empower them and create a culture, not an unhealthy culture. I don't know, I'm not inside there, but I would say that whatever they have up there is working, and other people will learn. And the All Blacks, they have books coming out, and it's not about win, win, win. It has to be about more than that, because I think if it is about that, I think we're on the way. It's a slippery slope down, like.
Valerie, you had a very different type of experience playing the game, because the emphasis was not on kind of meeting certain kind of fitness targets. It wasn't GPS tracking. It was none of that.
No, and our coach would have really been emphasising skill level, and he often spoke, because he was looking at the men's game, especially towards the end of our career, like my career, say 2014. So look at the men's game, and they were all spending their time in the gym and all this other work, and he was always putting the emphasis back on you know, the skill and being on the pitch and being out on the pitch, because it was kind of getting lost sometimes. Do you think it did in your, like it was about, you know, how fast can you run, how long can you run for?
It was like whoever won, what are they doing?
Yeah.
They have to. The Armagh fellas won, and they were all like he-men.
But where does creativity sit in all of this? I
So
think of someone like...
with Eimear, he definitely had that culture where, like, he empowered us, he allowed us to become leaders, and he trusted in us, and that, like, we played what we saw. Now, we wouldn't have done really any tactics. We would have always spoken of ourselves, maybe spent 5 minutes on the opposition in lead up to a big game, but he really just wanted us to have our skill level up to speed, and you know, that we were tuned in. And Eamon was brilliant at that. He was brilliant at reading us as players and sensing. So we could come in at half time and be beating the team well, and he'd really be picking at things and not happy. And then we might come in losing, and he'd be very upbeat. So he was able to gauge us as people, you know, and try and get the best out of us and motivate us that way. And it was very much, you go out there, the shackles were off, and you got to play, and you know, you try to do what was right for the team, and by doing that and playing your part, success came. And it was always based on performance. Like, we never really talked about winning, but it was about performing to our best. I think that's what worked well then.
Yeah. Eimear, in that, I saw the trailer to that grass ceiling one, and you had this beautiful description. I think it's where you described the sense of this is what freedom feels like when you're on the field. I wonder how many people playing the game today at a serious club or inter-county level, ever experience that sense. But what do you think? Do you think that's been kind of suffocated out of the game? This kind of just the encroachment of technology. I mean, Tomás said it's not healthy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and Timmy mentioned the NFL there, and you kind of wonder, did these systems come in from other sports like that, where it maybe makes more sense? Because I mean, in the NFL, each player has a very, very specific role to play, whereas I think in the GAA, every player has to be like a total player. Like if you're a back, you're expected to come forward and attack the ball. If you're a forward, you're expected to make tackles and, you know, stop your back from coming out. So I don't think it translates that well to the GAA, but I think I'm lucky personally in that I've never really been in a setup like that. You know, it's always been, you know, just go out and hurl freely.
Well, Valerie, you're in the Women's Gaelic Players Association.
Yeah.
I mean, is there no pushback from players on all of this? I'm always concerned about the sustainability of an amateur model. If this is what we are, a community-based amateur organisation, we clearly have to actually prioritise a sustainable model. And once you have people who are kind of living these lives where they're being constantly monitored, you know, in their free time. These are people who are going to work by the day, and by night they're walking around with GPSs. They're being monitoring what they're doing at home, like Tomás. Do players not?
Yeah, well, I think
is
in
there
the
no
women's
pushback
game,
from them?
we're like there's squads looking for kind of more analysis or looking for a bit of professionalism, and sometimes by having the GPS systems, the GPS systems, you know, they feel like they're, you know, getting a bit more professional, and I think, you know, it has its place. I mean, it can help with injury prevention or, you know, seeing where players can maybe improve on. But yes, I do think that there's an overemphasis on it, and you become like robotic. And actually, some players, and I've spoken to one lad who was playing club, and he said he put everything in, he watched everything he did, and his food intake and everything, and he was playing terribly, and he was taken off. And then he's like, you know, that happened for 2 years, and then he said, do you know what? I need to have a different approach. He started to enjoy it. He did do a bit of yoga and stuff, but like he took a different approach, had a few drinks, and he played much better. So it depends on the person, but I do think it's gone way too far.
Timmy, I'm going to leave the last word with you. Just you've been travelling around the country. The response you got when you went back to your home club in Bishopstown, you said, was it remarkably positive. There's a bit of a mission statement at the end in Act 3, you know, where you're speaking at people and asking them to mind themselves and all of this sort of stuff. Like, what are you hoping to come out of your play when you're going around to different communities? What are you hoping? What kind of change are you looking to see in clubs? What can they do?
There's a lot they can do. On one level, it's like to have that conversations can start about any such theme that we've talked about here, and that people don't feel reluctant to talk about something, and that it starts conversations that potentially allow people to open up to other things and feel okay about talking to each other about things. And then on another level, one of the real reasons I wanted to bring the show into the GA clubs is to bring a piece of theatre into a space that isn't used to it, so that potentially someone sees it and goes, oh, like there's something else I can engage with myself. I can see myself in this thing and I can engage with it outside of the sport. So like an inkling or a spark of someone to go questioning of self, but also possibility of the self, that they could go to see something like that, which is like a metaphor for maybe parts of the self. Yeah, and for the idea that the GA can be a place of change and community change is something that I'd like to think is really possible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. There's the message that we're going to conclude on. I want to thank all our panelists. I want to thank everyone for sticking with us. I know it's been a long day because you've been at a good few things. There's a lot obviously going on in the town tonight, so enjoy, and we'll see you about the place. Okay. Thank you, Prof.